Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to a little Japanese island today to explore Yukio Mishima's The Sound of Waves.
Oh, cool.
Now, you might hear love story and think beach read, you know,
Right.
but I think this is so much more than that. It's like Mishima uses this really simple romance to kind of comment on all the massive changes happening in post-war Japan.
Yeah, it is really fascinating how he takes like this really classic love story setup.
Mm-hmm.
Shinji's this young fisherman falls for Hatsu. She comes from a wealthy family.
Right.
And he just uses that to explore all these huge themes like nature tradition and like all the societal shifts that were just like shaking Japan at the time.
Yeah, you get this like Romeo and Juliet vibe, but
Right.
instead of feuding families, it's like a whole society grappling with like, what does it even mean to be Japanese in a world that's suddenly like so different?
Yeah,
But let's start with Shinji and Hatsu. Their love is just so pure,
it is.
so innocent.
Yeah.
It's almost like a stark contrast to all the gossip and the jealousy that surrounds them.
Yeah, what's really striking is that their love isn't just this feeling, you know?
Yeah.
It drives them to act with just incredible selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's one point where Shinji risks his own reputation to protect Hatsu's honor.
Right.
It's a small act, but it reveals like the depth of their commitment to each other.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember when I was reading it, I was really struck by how the island itself,
Oh, yeah.
Utajima, felt like more than just a setting, especially the sea.
Yes.
Mishima's descriptions are so vivid. It's almost like the sea is like another character in the story.
Absolutely. Mishima uses nature, and particularly the sea, to reflect all the emotional currents of the story.
Yeah.
Like when Shinji's feeling lost or uncertain, the sea is stormy, turbulent.
Uh-huh.
But when he's with Hatsu, there's a sense of peace and calm reflected in the water.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you think, like, how much does nature influence our own feelings in the real world, right?
All the time.
Yeah.
Think about how a sunny day can just like instantly lift your mood.
Oh, for sure.
Or like a walk in the forest can calm you down
Absolutely.
after a stressful day.
Yeah.
Mishima seems to be tapping into that like primal connection we have with nature.
Yeah.
But even on like a remote island,
Mm-hmm.
the outside world kind of seeps in.
It does.
And that's where we get that whole tradition versus modernity conflict, right?
Exactly. Utajima is very traditional. It has a really rigid social structure. And that becomes like a source of tension, especially when it comes to Shinji. And Hatsu,
Yeah.
Shinji works hard, but he comes from a humble background.
Yeah.
Hatsu's family is like upper class.
It's that age-old story, boy meets girl. They fall in love, but their families are from different worlds.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just their families in this case. It's a whole culture wrestling with, like, what does it mean to change?
Totally.
Mishima seems to be drawing this parallel between, like, their struggles as lovers,
Yeah.
what was happening in Japan at the time.
Mishima was incredibly concerned about what he saw as the erosion of like traditional Japanese values because of westernization. He seemed to really romanticize a simpler, more rural life, which you can see in his portrayal of Utajima.
Right,
But what's interesting is the novel doesn't like reject modernity.
right.
The way the story resolves kind of suggests that true worth is about character,
Mm-hmm.
not status.
That reminds me of this quote I read recently.
Oh, yeah.
It said, character is what you are in the dark.
I like that.
It's not about how much money you have or what family you came from.
Right.
It's about how you act when nobody's looking.
Yeah.
And speaking of character honor, seems to be like a huge driving force for Shinji. He faces so many obstacles, but he never compromises his integrity.
Right.
It's almost like he embodies those classic samurai virtues.
Yeah.
Loyalty, discipline, perseverance.
And it's interesting, Mishima shows strength in Hatsu as well. It would have been easy to make her like a passive character, just the object of Shinji's affection. But she has so much agency and resilience, especially considering the societal pressures that she's facing.
There's that one scene where she stands by Shinji despite all the rumors and gossip swirling around them.
Yes.
It takes a lot of courage to defy social expectations,
Oh, totally.
especially in such a small community.
Absolutely a small moment, but it
Yeah.
speaks volumes about her character.
Totally. And remember, her father, Terukichi, he's initially opposed to their relationship because of Shinji's social standing.
Right.
And then there's that beautiful moment of reconciliation where he comes to accept Shinji.
Yes.
It's like Mishima's hinting that tradition and modernity aren't necessarily like mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
They can coexist.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
This reconciliation scene really highlights how true character can overcome even like the most deeply ingrained societal prejudices.
Totally. It's a testament to the power of human connection
Mm-hmm.
and the possibility for understanding and acceptance even in the face of change and difference.
Okay, so we've talked about the characters,
Yeah.
the setting,
Uh-huh.
some of the major themes.
Okay.
I'm curious to hear more about Mishima's writing style itself.
Okay.
I was struck by how he blends these incredibly vivid descriptions of nature with a very straightforward, almost like folktale way of telling the story.
What's really fascinating about his style is he manages to create this immersive experience for the reader without overcomplicating things.
Right.
His prose is incredibly evocative, especially when he's describing the sea.
Yeah.
Like there's a passage where he compares the sea at dawn to a vast silver sheet stretching to the horizon, with the rising sun painting the sky with hues of rose and gold.
Yeah.
You can practically feel the warmth of the sun and hear the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore.
It's like he transports you right to that island.
Yeah.
And the way he balances those quiet, reflective moments with scenes of like real drama and tension is masterful.
Speaking of drama and tension, one scene that really stands out is when Shinji gets caught in that storm at sea.
Yeah.
Mishima's description of the raging waves and Shinji's desperate struggle for survival is absolutely gripping.
It is.
And it makes the peaceful interludes all the more poignant. It's like he's mirroring the rhythm of life itself, ebb and flow of calm and chaos.
That's interesting you bring up rhythm because there's almost a musicality to his prose,
Yeah.
which makes sense considering the title The Sound of Waves.
Uh-huh.
It's like the very language of the novel is meant to evoke like the sounds and sensations of the sea.
Right.
But I think this deep dive wouldn't be complete without talking about the cultural context of the novel.
Okay.
We touched on it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that The Sound of Waves was published in 1954, just a few years after World War II.
Right.
Japan was undergoing this period of intense transformation, grappling with the aftermath of the war and the influx of Western influence.
It was a huge national identity crisis.
Yeah.
A lot of Japanese people worried that their traditional values were being eroded by modernization and globalization.
And Mishima was very much a part of that conversation.
Oh yeah, he's a staunch nationalist.
Yeah.
He idealized pre-war Japan and often criticized what he saw as the negative impacts of westernization.
So how does that play out in The Sound of Waves? It seems like he's romanticizing this simple rural life on Utajima,
Right.
contrasting it with the more modern urban world that's encroaching on the island.
Absolutely. You see it in the way he contrasts Shinji, the hardworking fisherman who embodies those traditional virtues,
Yeah.
with some of the wealthier characters who are more influenced by modern values and materialism.
Like Yasuo, the son of the lighthouse keeper.
Yeah.
He's infatuated with Hatsu,
He is.
but he represents this more like worldly, cynical perspective
Yeah,
that's kind of at odds with Shinji's sincerity and connection to nature.
exactly. Yasuo represents the allure and the potential pitfalls of modernity, while Shinji embodies the steadfastness and purity of tradition.
But it's not a simple black and white dichotomy.
Right.
It seems like Mishima is acknowledging both the beauty and the limitations of tradition,
Yeah.
and like the possibilities and the dangers of
So
modernization.
that's what makes it so nuanced and thought-provoking.
It's not like a simplistic celebration or condemnation.
Yeah. Right. Of either side. It's an exploration of the complexities of navigating change while holding on to what's truly important.
Yeah, and that makes me think about what you said earlier about how the novel doesn't reject modernity.
Right.
Instead, it's just that true worth lies in character resilience,
Yeah.
a deep connection to nature, values that transcend any specific time or place.
And that's one of the reasons why I think The Sound of Waves continues to resonate with readers today,
Oh, for sure.
regardless of their cultural background.
Yeah.
It speaks to those universal human experiences of love loss, perseverance, and the search for meaning in a rapidly changing world.
And it leaves us with some pretty thought-provoking questions.
In a world that's constantly evolving, how do we hold on to the values that matter most to us?
Right. How do we balance the allure of the new with the wisdom of the old?
How do we find our own sense of place and purpose amidst the ever-shifting tides of life?
Exactly. Those are all questions that Mishima grappled with.
Yeah, and his exploration of them in The Sound of Waves offers a beautiful and insightful starting point for our own reflections.
I feel like we've only just begun to scratch the surface of this deceptively simple
Yeah.
but incredibly layered novel.
There's still so much to uncover, especially about Mishima himself and how his personal life and beliefs might have shaped this story.
Right.
So we'll explore that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
along with some final thoughts on the novel's enduring legacy.
Sounds good.
Stay with us.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the sound of waves. Before we went away, we were talking about how much Mishima was affected by all the changes happening in Japan after the war. It seemed like he was really wrestling with, how to hold on to tradition in a world that was rapidly modernizing.
Yeah, you can really see that internal struggle reflected in his writing style. Remember
Okay.
how we talked about the way he describes nature? It's so vivid and evocative, but also very straightforward. It's like he's trying to capture the essence of something timeless, something pure amidst all the chaos of change.
Yes, it's like those descriptions are a way for him to ground himself, to reconnect with like a deeper sense of beauty and order. There's this one passage that always sticks with me. It's where Shinji's watching the sunrise over the sea, and Mishima writes, "The sea lay shimmering, a vast silver sheet stretching to the horizon. The rising sun, like a molten pearl, cast long, fiery fingers across the water, painting the sky with hues of rose and gold." It's like you can almost feel the warmth of the sun on your skin and hear the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore.
It's not just about painting a pretty picture, though. Mishima uses those sensory details to create a sense of atmosphere and mood. Like his descriptions reflect the characters' inner lives. When Shinji's feeling anxious or uncertain, the sea is often described as turbulent and stormy. But when he's with Hatsu, the water becomes calm and inviting. It's almost like the landscape itself is reacting to their emotions.
I'm curious, though, if Mishima was so concerned about preserving tradition, why choose to write a love story? It seems like a very personal, almost universal theme, not necessarily tied to any specific cultural context.
That's a great question. I think Mishima understood that love at its core is about connection. It's about finding meaning and belonging in the world. And in a time when Japanese society was undergoing such rapid change, he may have seen love as a way to reaffirm those fundamental human values even as the world around them was shifting. Remember, it's not that Mishima rejects modernity outright. He just seems to be searching for a way to balance the old and the new, to find a path forward that doesn't completely erase the past.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like he's using the love story as a microcosm to explore the larger societal shifts happening in Japan. And speaking of shifts, there's that one scene where Shinji gets caught in a storm at sea. It's so intense, so visceral. Mishima doesn't shy away from depicting the raw power of nature, which can be both beautiful and terrifying.
Exactly. And that scene isn't just about the storm itself. It's about Shinji's resilience, his ability to endure hardship and emerge stronger on the other side. In a way, it's a metaphor for Japan itself, struggling to rebuild and find its footing after the devastation of the war. It's also a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming forces, there's a certain dignity and strength in simply persevering, in refusing to give up.
That reminds me of something we talked about earlier, how Shinji embodies those classic samurai virtues. It's not just about being a warrior, it's about having a code of honor, a commitment to something larger than yourself. And that seems to be something that Mishima deeply admired.
Mishima was fascinated by the samurai code, the idea of living and dying by a strict set of principles. He saw it as a way to restore a sense of order and meaning in a world that she felt had lost its way. And while he might have romanticized those ideals, there's a certain power in them that continues to resonate even today.
I wonder if part of Mishima's attraction to the samurai code stemmed from the sense of discipline and self-control it required. He was known for his own strict personal regimen, his dedication to physical fitness and martial arts. It's almost like he was trying to cultivate that same sense of inner strength and control in his own life.
It's fascinating how his personal beliefs and practices seem to inform his writing. He was so deliberate in everything he did, always striving for a sense of perfection and beauty, whether in his art or in his personal life. And you can see that attention to detail reflected in his prose.
It's like every sentence is carefully crafted, every image meticulously chosen to evoke a specific feeling or idea. But there's also a sense of recite in his writing. He doesn't over-explain things or get bogged down in unnecessary details. He trusts the reader to connect the dots, to feel the emotional undercurrents of the story without needing to spell everything out.
And that's what makes his writing so powerful. It's like he's inviting the reader to participate in the creative process, to bring their own experiences and interpretations to the story.
Speaking of interpretations, I'm curious to hear more about how The Sound of Waves has been received over the years. Has its meaning changed as the world has changed? Or are those themes of love, loss, and resilience still as relevant today as they were in 1954?
That's a great question, and one that we'll delve into more deeply in the final part of our deep dive. But I think it's safe to say that The Sound of Waves continues to resonate with readers precisely because it speaks to those universal human experiences that transcend time and place. Whether you're reading it in 1954 or 2025, there's something about Shinji and Hatsu's story that touches on something deep within us, something that reminds us of our own capacity for love, for resilience, for finding meaning in the face of adversity.
And as much as the novel is about love and loss, it's also about finding your place in the world, navigating those complex social forces that shape our lives and trying to make sense of it all. Mishima's own struggles with identity and belonging, his search for meaning in a rapidly changing world, are woven into the fabric of the story, making it both deeply personal and universally relatable.
And that's where things get really interesting, because to fully appreciate The Sound of Waves, we need to understand the man behind the words. We need to explore Mishima's own life and how his experiences might have shaped this seemingly simple yet profoundly moving story. And that's what we'll be doing in the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Yukio Mishima's The Sound of Waves. We've been talking about this deceptively simple love story set on this remote island in Japan, but we've uncovered all these deeper layers about, tradition and change and the search for meaning.
Right.
And I think to really grasp the full weight of this novel, we need to talk about Mishima himself.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We can't ignore the man behind the words.
Yeah.
I mean, Mishima's life was almost as dramatic as his novels.
Maybe he was.
He was the celebrated writer, playwright, actor, even a bodybuilder and a political activist.
Wow.
But he was also deeply troubled by what he saw happening in post-war Japan.
It's like he was living a double life.
Yeah.
On the one hand, he was embracing the modern world, achieving success in all these different fields. But at the same time, he was yearning for this idealized vision of the past.
Yeah.
Like a Japan that he felt was slipping away.
And that tension, that internal conflict that's at the heart of The Sound of Waves.
Yeah.
Think about how he contrasts the simplicity of life on Utajima with the complexities of the modern world that are encroaching on the island. It's like he's saying, look, there's beauty and value in these traditional ways of life.
Right.
But they're being threatened by these outside forces.
Which brings us to Shinji.
Yes.
This young fisherman, he's so connected to the sea, to the traditional values of his community. He's almost like the embodiment of Mishima's ideal man,
Yeah.
strong, honorable, living in a harmony with nature.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, was Shinji just a projection of Mishima's own longing for a simpler time?
It's a really good question. It's like he's saying, this is the kind of man I wish I could be. Uncorrupted by the modern world, living a life of purpose and integrity.
But even Shinji has to confront the challenges of modernity.
He does.
He can't completely escape the influence of the outside world.
Right. Remember when he travels to the mainland?
Yes.
He's exposed to all the temptations and distractions of city life.
Yeah.
But he chooses to return to Utajima, to Hatsue. It's like he's making a conscious decision to embrace his roots, to honor the values that are most important to him.
That's such a powerful moment, and I think it
Yeah.
speaks to the core message of the novel.
Yeah.
It's that true strength comes from staying true to yourself.
Exactly.
Even when everything around you is changing, even when you're not sure what the future holds.
Yeah, it's not about rejecting the modern world outright.
Right.
It's about finding a way to integrate the best of both worlds, the old and the new.
That's interesting you bring up the idea of integration because it makes me think about Mishima's own life.
Yeah.
He was so clearly drawn to the past, to tradition, but he was also a product of the modern world. He couldn't escape that.
Right, and I think that's what makes him such a compelling and tragic figure. He was always trying to reconcile these opposing forces within himself. This longing for a lost past and this awareness that change is inevitable.
It's almost impossible to talk about Mishima without talking about his death.
It is.
I mean, his ritual suicide in 1970, it was such a shocking and controversial act.
It was a reminder of how deeply he felt about his beliefs, how committed he was to his ideals.
Even if those ideals were ultimately unattainable.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
did he see his death as an artistic statement?
Yeah.
One final act of defiance against a world that he felt had lost its way?
It's a question that scholars and critics have been debating for decades.
For sure.
And I don't think we'll ever have a definitive answer.
Probably not.
But I do think it's important to remember that Mishima was a really complex person.
Oh, yeah?
His life and his work can't be easily categorized or explained away.
That's part of what makes him so fascinating. He challenges us to think critically, to question our own assumptions,
Right.
and just wrestle with the big questions,
Yeah.
of life and death, tradition and modernity, identity and belonging.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the sound of waves,
Yeah.
I'm left with this sense of awe and wonder.
Yeah, me too.
It's amazing how this seemingly simple love story can open up these vast and profound questions. It's a real testament to Mishima's genius.
He had this incredible ability to weave together the personal and the political, the beautiful and the tragic,
Right.
to create a world that's both deeply moving and intellectually stimulating.
Even though Mishima's gone, his words continue to resonate with us.
They do.
They challenge us to confront the complexities of our own lives and to search for meaning in a world that's constantly changing.
And maybe in that search, we might find a little bit of ourselves reflected in the characters and themes of The Sound of Waves,
Yeah.
in Shinji's resilience, in Hatsu's quiet strength,
Right.
in the enduring power of love.
And the beauty of the natural world.
Exactly.
So as we leave the shores of Utajima and go back to our own lives, I hope you'll take a little bit of Mishima's spirit with you.
Yeah.
His passion, his intensity, his unwavering commitment to his beliefs, even in the face of adversity.
That's a great takeaway.
And maybe like Shinji and Hatsu, you'll find moments of peace and beauty amidst the ever-changing tides of life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.